So what's happening with our teams and with ourselves when we get to this point is the stress response is activated. And it's being activated at the moment due to a number of these feelings, but also due to an underlying fear that's taking place. And the brains evolve very strongly to react quickly to threats. And David Rock came up with the SCARF model, which talks about our status, our certainty, our autonomy, our relatedness, and fairness as being essential to us. And whenever we feel threats to any of those things, we have a corresponding negative reaction to it. But being consumed by fear, it causes wear and tear on our bodies and on our minds. And we need to find ways to move through it, to acknowledge that these negative emotions are valid, but to then move through them and not get stuck in those negative emotions, which is essential. So what does happen when we have a negative response to stress? What are we dealing with, perhaps within ourselves or within our teams? We're dealing with negative feelings and emotions such as anger, rumination, catastrophizing, helplessness. We can be prone to rash decision-making, as well as immobilization, ignorance, selfishness, and the like. And I think this sense of helplessness, it can immobilize us so much so that we genuinely need to look for ways that we can feel active in some ways. And that's why the importance of getting projects underway with your teams and individuals is really essential, because we need to establish that sense of agency for everyone. It's really important that we have that within our teams, because otherwise the negative emotions can consume us and eventually result in an emotional contagion. And that's what we don't want happening. We've already been witness to it in the supermarkets. And I'm alarmed by the effects that COVID-19 has had on individuals. But I'm also really concerned about the vulnerable in our society and the impact that it's going to have on them. And so the first thing to do is recognize these behaviors are going to be rampant. They're going to be elevated. Acknowledge them within yourself and within your team members. Even when you just verbalize how you're feeling, if you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you're feeling helpless, just saying that to yourself reduces that negative emotion up to 7 times. So there are some little tips and tricks that you can apply as you're going through this process. But the important thing is acknowledge it and move on from it. Develop that emotional agility in order to perform at your best. Now, some of you may be familiar with Kelly McGonigal's work around stress. She's a health psychologist from Stanford, and she's written a book called The Upside of Stress. And what she's found in her research is that individuals who experience stress and view that stress as helpful have significantly greater benefit than individuals who experience stress and view that stress as threatening. And so your perception of stress actually makes a difference on how you respond to it psychologically, physically, and behaviorally. And so viewing stress as something that's helpful, noticing when you might be short of breath, or your heart starts beating faster, thinking, isn't my body amazing that it has this response to stress? It's a catalyst for action, and then using that catalyst as a force for good versus letting that catalyst become the end of you, really. If you view stress as being something that's really negative, something that's really bad for you, if your heart starts racing and your palms get sweaty and you're thinking, oh no, this is really bad for me, stress is a silent killer, it actually has a significantly more negative effect on you and your body than if you had those feelings and viewed stress as helpful. And so look for ways when you're feeling stressed to help you cope through those periods. Acknowledge that it's stressful, but view stress as something that is good for us because it acts as a source of motivation and it catalyzes action when it's necessary. And she has an excellent TED Talk as well that I recommend and that we'll send out afterwards with the resources. So when you are leading well, I recommend these 3 things as a leader for yourselves, and you can share these with your team as well. First of all, you want to establish a base of internal calm by engaging in activities that help you feel calmer, clearer, and stronger. The fastest way to do this is through the breath. We all typically, it's across, humanity, we all shallow breathe. Unless we regularly practice diaphragmatic breathing or deep breathing, we're only using the top third of our lungs. When in reality, we should really be using our bellies to breathe and breathing deep into our diaphragm. And so when you take a deep inhalation in, you can count to 4 as you're inhaling through your nostrils. You hold it for 1, and then you exhale for 6. And just by doing this once, having that 1 6-second exhalation, it decreases the amount of stress hormones that are circulating throughout your body and increases hormones such as acetylcholine, which counteract that stress response and activate a relaxation response. And so when they say take a breath or just breathe, there's actually a scientific reason for it. And it's important to practice this regularly throughout your day. The next thing that you can do in order to establish that sense of calm is an exercise called 3 Good Things. And this was created by the godfather of positive psychology, Martin Seligman. And he recommends that at the end of each day, write down 3 things that went well that day. And they can be really tiny things, like you had time to stop for coffee, or they can be big things. And then write down beside each of those things, why did they go well? And do that for 7 days. Within that time frame, your overall psychological and physical well-being actually get elevated. They've done extensive research on this. And over time, try doing it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You'll eventually start to notice a pattern of why things are going well. For me, it's often when I'm planning. So whenever I plan things really well, they go well, surprise. And so that became a thing for me to become a really meticulous planner. When I'm focused is another time. So when I turn off all my distractions, I turn off my notifications, and I'm present, that's when things go really well. And lastly, when I'm social. When I'm around people, I get energy off of them, and things always seem to go well. And so for me, that was my pattern. But if you practice this over time, you'll eventually notice a pattern of different behaviors that you're responsible for that contribute to things going well. This also contributes to resilience, which I think is really essential and imperative during this period. Lastly, in order to establish an internal sense of calm, is reflecting. So I've been speaking to a number of leaders this week and last week, and one of the resonating themes about what's going on is that this is finally an opportunity for them to breathe and to reflect and to work on the projects that they've been pushing to the side for the last few months. And that set off a few alarm bells for me because I thought, wow, that's a silver lining. You know, this virus, is a pandemic, and we are fearful of it, and it's affecting a lot of people and vulnerable people. However, there are a group of people out there, leaders, who have had their pedal to the metal since January 1, going all out, and haven't taken the opportunity to just think, just reflect, strategize, work on their own self-development, get the opportunity to actually coach their team members one-on-one and have actual coaching sessions. And so reflecting will enable you to do that as a leader. And I encourage you to do it every day and see what comes from it, because it'll also increase your self-awareness. It'll improve your relationships. And it'll give you that sense of calm that you've taken the opportunity to do that. Number 2 is cultivating empathy and compassion, and this is for yourself and others. Mark had talked about making time in meetings for more than just business, and this is essential, making the time to connect with other people, making time for fun, making time to elevate trust, and just create the type of environment that you would have if you were not working virtually. And so that's really essential. Next is acknowledge the feelings and behaviors others may have. We spoke about that briefly. And I think it's important to give people that third space to speak about how they're feeling, and acknowledge that, you know, during times like this, it's natural to feel anxious, afraid, or threatened. And the last one in empathy and compassion is just around being helpful. And there are a lot of different ways that we can be helpful as leaders, but just go the extra mile during this period. Make the effort to ask individuals, what do they need? Show a true sense of altruism, which can go a really long way. In an MRI study on compassion, it showed that it warmed up, when you were compassionate towards another person, it warmed up the motor circuits of the brain, readying you to take action. And so we don't just feel suffering of other people. We want to help and we want to do something about it. And when we do that, it also has a benefit for us as individuals and as leaders. Number 3 is adopt an internal locus of control. And so at the moment, many of us will feel as though we have an external locus of control, meaning everything that's happening around us is out of our control, which some of that is true. Some of what's happening is outside of our control. However, there is a lot that is within our control. And having that self-efficacy, having that belief that, okay, it's chaos on the outside, but what can I control on the inside with regards to my thoughts, the actions I'm going to take, the type of person, the type of leader that I want to be? How are you not going to let that emotional contagion affect you as a leader and affect your teams as individuals? Take the opportunity to review your team and individual goals and operationalize them in new ways, and definitely cultivate a growth mindset. You know, look at this as an opportunity. Realize that, you know, there aren't many times that you're going to experience this opportunity to press the pause button, take the time to reflect, and look at the growth and development of yourself as an individual and as a leader and across and within your team. I think that's really, really imperative. So some traits of optimistic people. I think as leaders, it's important to put on that brave face that Mark was talking about and demonstrate optimism. You're still a realist. You're not ignoring the reality of the current situation. However, you still demonstrate optimism. Now, while hope isn't a strategy, you are hopeful as a leader. You have hope that during this time, you're going to garner your resources, you're going to meet the challenges, you're going to develop yourself, you're going to develop your team. And I think that's really important, that you have that hope. And staying positive in these challenging circumstances is also key. Express gratitude. You know, when you get to the end of each week, think about, you know, what are you grateful for this week? Because the evidence behind gratitude is as long as my arm. And it is really powerful tool for both managing a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, because it enables you to develop that resilience and to recognize, actually, you know, I am in a good place. I have an amazing team, or I have an amazing family, or my dog or cat's amazing, or, you know, I have running water that's clean. And just take the opportunity each week to be grateful for something that's in your life. And even try a gratitude project with your team during this time. I did that with a few of my teams, and it was amazing. You just get every individual on your team for 30 days to take a photo of something they're grateful for. And then at the end of the 30 days, you have a team meeting We can obviously do this virtually, and you have each individual on your team show their gratitude presentation just through photos and speaking to them. And it's extremely powerful. And lastly, is optimistic people see the best in others. And I think during this time, as I mentioned earlier, I've been really alarmed by the reaction of a lot of people. It's been quite disturbing, and it's taken a lot of practice of compassion and empathy to understand the psyche of individuals that are doing this. I know they are feeling pressured. I know they're moving to panic, and that's what we're witnessing. But I'm also witnessing a lot of good. A lot of people who are helping the elderly, stores opening early for the elderly and the disabled so that they can get access to things that they actually need. And so really try and look for the good in individuals as well. And always think that they have their best interests at heart. Lastly, what I recommend for yourselves and for team members as well is have these daily rituals. So at the start of your day, identify your priorities and your non-negotiables for each day. Make it a small list, you know, and identify what are the core things that you need to get through each and every day. And then, as Mark mentioned, you can create blocks of time in your day to get shit done. And this can be 30-minute blocks, it can be 60-minute blocks. The Pomodoro app is an excellent app that actually lets you block time out and reminds you when you've reached 25 minutes. And use that as the opportunity to get things done. Turn off all of your notifications, put your phone on silent, and just use those blocks of times to get as much done as you can and increase your ability to stay focused. The more you do that, the more you'll be able to focus and stay on task and not multitask. Number 3 is add buffers into your day. And this is when, what can happen when we're working from home is we can get stuck in front of our computer, and all of a sudden it's 6 hours later and we're still sitting in front of our computer. And so blocks of time will help you manage this, but also having reminders throughout your day, every 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever works for you, is to have a reminder, an alarm come up, get up, move around, get a glass of water, have a healthy snack, make a phone call, connect with someone. I think it's really imperative that you have buffers in your day. Even when you're in the office, you know, adding buffers to your day will make a big difference on your productivity and your performance. 4 is get active. If you've been putting off getting active and getting fit, and it's already the end of March, I think this is also a good opportunity to make that a priority. We know all the benefits of physical exercise and what it can do for you. Not only in your brain's performance, but in the development of new neurons, which is amazing. And so it can contribute to you becoming clearer, more focused, and more present in your day-to-day interactions. Breathing, we've already talked about the importance of taking the opportunity throughout your day to practice that diaphragmatic breathing right into your belly. And lastly, connecting with others. We can feel quite isolated during this time, and I think it's really important that you reach out to individuals on a regular basis. As Mark said, over-communicate and determine what platforms you're going to use for what as well. I think that's really key. You know, certain platforms like WhatsApp is great for group chats and whatnot, but for one-on-ones that, you know, are on another level, you might want to pick up the phone and have that phone call. So determine which platforms you're going to use and what's appropriate for that situation. So, what's next? Mark and I were discussing this, and it's not set in stone, but our proposal is that we run 30-minute webinars every Tuesday and Friday at 9:30 that discuss different topics that we believe are relevant. When I first started researching for this webinar, I wrote pages and pages and pages of notes, and I had a really hard time focusing on something that was going to be valid, practical, and applicable straight away. And so Mark and I had a long conversation about this, and we thought, why don't we run 2 webinars a week, 30 minutes each, quick, to the point, practical, that'll give you tools that are useful during this really difficult period. So we came up with a few ideas around best practice in virtual communication, remote well-being for yourself and your teams, transformational leadership, mental toughness, and the list goes on and on. And so what we'd love for you to do is give us that feedback on topics that you would like to discuss over these webinars, and we can throw them together over the next few weeks. If you are looking for a deeper level of support, as Mark mentioned, we're both executive mentors and coaches, and please reach out to us. We also offer virtual workshops, as well as consulting in interesting and exciting projects. And so our details are at the bottom of this slide. So please take them down and feel free to get in touch with us. But as I said, over the coming weeks and months, we're not sure how long this is going to go on for. We'll be there to support you through those 30-minute webinars. Mark, did you have anything else to add before we go to Q&A?
No. I love the way, as you can probably appreciate, people, this whole thing's been a bit thrown together, which is, I think, which is illustrative of the times. And I've really loved I've given a sort of hard leadership overview, and Kirsten has really complemented that, I think, beautifully with the more human aspect. But that's not to diminish either. Both are really, really important. You know, we've got to have the strategy and structures and the leadership piece in place, but we've also got, at the end of the day, we're humans, right? And I think some of those beautiful things like gratitude and communication and just some of those engagement strategies and helping people to be calm, breathing, moving out location. I think they're gorgeous. You've got to do both of these things. They're as well as, not either or. So I love the way this has come together. I've really enjoyed the presentation. I've only just seen it for the first time.
Yeah, we had a small artistic difference of opinion.
Right.
So I took it over.